are 7 specific Game of Thrones characters who perfectly represent the 7 deadly sins of lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. However, if you flip these upside down, you'll find another set of 7 characters who represent the exact opposite, the 7 heavenly virtues. I'll be comparing the characters who represent the 7 deadly sins and their corresponding heavenly virtues, starting with lust versus chastity. Lust in the context of Game of Thrones is deeper than the strong intense desire for the sultry display of affection, 100,000 subscribers, money, power, or food. It runs so deep it becomes a craving that turns desire into depravity. The sin of lust would have been represented by Cersei Lannister because of her incestuous relationship with her brother, or Robert Baratheon because of how promiscuous he was. But when a man who defiles his biological daughters exists in Game of Thrones, we need to give respect where respect is due.
You're prettier than half my daughters.
You got a nice wet twat between your legs.
As a wildling with no regard for common decency, Craster turns his lustful appetites towards his own daughters, keeping them as both wives and children. By the time we meet him at Craster's keep, his family has multiplied into an incestuous household with a sea of daughters. It's just too despicable to explain how he makes his daughters bear him yet more daughters to continue his abominable cycle.
This is our place. Our husband keeps us safe.
But on the flip side of this deadly sin is chastity, a heavenly virtue which excludes or moderates the indulgence of the sexual appetite, and no one represents this virtue better than Lord Varys, who stands as the polar opposite of Craster's actions. Where Craster indulges without restraint, Varys symbolizes self-control.
Allow me to return the favor.
Lord Varys is utterly unperturbed by sexual pleasures or physical desire. His dedication lies with the realm, not with personal pleasure, because desire destroys men, so that they can't set out for other goals.
I see what desire does to people, what it's done to this country. I am very glad to have no part in it. The absence of desire leaves one free to pursue other things.
This choice allows him to wield influence over kings and queens alike without becoming a prey to the selfish urges that drive many others, especially Craster. Craster lives in a world that centers around his self-gratification, and this ends up corrupting everyone around him. He sees his daughters as nothing more than vessels to release his lustful semen into, twisting fatherly love into something monstrous. Meanwhile, Varys sees people as pieces on a chessboard, but not to be controlled for personal lustful gain, but for the greater good.
Littlefinger looks at you and sees a collection of profitable holes. I see a potential partner.
While Craster is enslaved by his desires, Lord Varys rises above sexual libidos to remain a disciplined man, and this isn't just because when he was a child, a sorcerer castrated him so he could use his sexual organs in a magical ritual.
With a hooked blade he sliced me, root and stem, chanting all the while. He burned my parts in a brazier.
Craster is an example of how lust can make one's soul rotten, while Varys shows us that by aligning your purpose with the greater good, you can create a strong foundation to counteract the temptations of lust. Wrath and patience are 2 sides of the same coin, and it's quite poetic that the Stark sisters represent each side of this coin distinctively. For Arya Stark, wrath is a tool, a response to the suffering she's endured, and a way to reclaim control over her life.
Do you have any stale ones from yesterday? Or any burnt ones?
Piss off.
When she sees her father die, a fire of vengeance ignites in her, leading her down a vindictive path of drafting a list of the people she intends to kill.
Cersei. Walder Frey.
Sansa, on the other hand, is the embodiment of patience, which is the ability to endure difficult people and situations without giving into anger or giving up hope. Patience here is a quiet strength that allows her to endure hardship without giving in to hatred. Where Arya responds to her suffering with brute action and fury, Sansa chooses endurance, growing stronger by withstanding the torment and manipulation she faces. Although Arya's wrath is fierce, she uses it as a motivation for brutality, which makes it kind of justifiable.
Thank you.
She is often seen training herself in deadly martial arts in order to confront the enemies on her list. Her journey takes her to Bravos, where she learns to hone her rage and become a fearless assassin. Each name she strikes off her list brings her closer to the closure she seeks, but it only pulls her deeper into the world of vengeance. Perhaps no woman in Westeros suffers in the hands of men like Sansa does. She's tortured by Joffrey, then Ramsay, and later suffers under Littlefinger's manipulation. Anyone would have easily cracked under such pressure. Just imagine it was Arya being tortured that way. All hell would break loose in Westeros. She would fight back with brutal force. But Sansa? No. Sansa endured in silence. She allowed herself time to learn and grow, adapting to the unhinged, dangerous political games of Westeros. Sansa's patience is what gave her a different kind of power, while Arya's wrath gave her immense strength. Her wrath eventually leads her to one of her greatest accomplishments, defeating the Night King and saving countless lives in the process. Her single-handed victory is fueled by several years of wrath, showing that when channeled properly, wrath can lead to a positive outcome. But always remember, wrath is a dangerous force, so rather than Arya, let's try to be like Sansa, whose patience and meekness allows her to thrive in a place where she's constantly undermined. She learns from each of her captors, becoming wiser and more strategic with each hardship. Her journey from that naive little girl to the formidable Lady of Winterfell proves that patience is key. Greed is a hunger that drives a person to accumulate everything for themselves, even if it means destroying others along the way. And the character that represents this sin in Game of Thrones is Littlefinger. He is cunning, Machiavellian, unpredictable, deceitful, and a ruthless opportunist who schemes, manipulates, and betrays without a second thought, and he does it all for everything.
I'd risk everything to get what I want.
Thankfully, the heavenly virtue of charity does not allow the deadly sin of greed to take center stage in the series, and this heavenly virtue is represented by Tyrion Lannister.
I did not do it. I did not kill Joffrey, but I wish that I had. Watching your vicious bastard die gave me more relief than 1,000 lying whores.
Where Littlefinger claws for influence, Tyrion uses his power to support and protect the people of King's Landing, just like when he tries everything in his power to stop Daenerys from burning it to the ground.
Tyrion Lannister is one of the few people alive who can make this country a better place. He has the mind for it, he has the will, he has the right last name, and
Littlefinger's unquenchable desire for power is what makes him whisper lies to turn the Lannisters against Ned Stark, all the while pretending to stand with Ned. It's also what drives him to manipulate Lisa Arryn into killing her own husband and sell Sansa to a sadistic torturer.
You freed me from the monsters who murdered my family, and you gave me to other monsters who murdered my family.
Can't expect any less from a cold sociopath who hungers for power over others, basically for its own sake. While Littlefinger sees others as plywood for the fire, Tyrion sees people as human beings who deserve dignity and assistance. Being born a dwarf and subject to ridicule for most of his life, Tyrion has admittedly developed a soft spot for his fellow outcasts and has shown them kindness, such as having a saddle designed for the crippled Bran Stark. Being physically weak, Tyrion is also upset when the helpless are harmed. He was particularly enraged when Janos Slynt carried out an order to kill a defenseless baby girl, Barra, because she was one of Robert's bastards.
Enough. Get it done. Kill the bastard.
Littlefinger's endless scheming is what leads him to pit Sansa against Arya Stark in an attempt to manipulate them, as he did many others. But greed couldn't allow him to see the loyalty and bond between the Stark sisters, which leads to his downfall at Arya's hand. What a fitting end for a man who sees everyone as a means to an end. Though gluttony is described as overindulgence in food or wine, it represents something far worse than that. It represents an unchecked hunger for something that lies beyond our grasp, whether it be power, pleasure, or control. And while some characters like Illyrio Mopatis or Robert Baratheon represent an aspect of this sin, Joffrey Baratheon takes it to brutal extremes.
This one here. Look at it and see what happens to traitors.
He is often obsessed with his authority, seeing his kingship as a license to engage in his every whim without restraint.
Tell me, which do you favor? Your fingers or your tongue? I could just cut your throat.
And while he does all these, on the flip side of things is Jon Snow, a spiffing representation of temperance, which is the constant mindfulness of others and one's surroundings, for self-control, abstinence, moderation, and delayed gratification. While Joffrey spends his time overindulging in his twisted delights of torturing and killing prostitutes and commanding people to fight to the death just so he can watch them be killed, Jon dedicates himself to protecting those around him. Joffrey's overindulgence in power turns him into a figure who inspires fear, while Jon's temperance earns him heaps of respect. Joffrey was so annoying and gluttonous when it came to his relationship with Sansa. To torment her and continually find new ways to humiliate and dehumanize her.
My mother tells me a king should never strike his lady. Sir Meryn.
If you really think about it, her suffering was gasoline that fueled his appetite for control. On the other hand, Jon respects others' dignity and is always learning from those he meets. Even in his relationship with Ygritte, Jon's temperate virtue is always guiding him. No wonder Ygritte often says,
"You know nothing, Jon Snow."
Because of how he's careful, cautious, and refrains from giving into the wildlings' brutal ways. His temperance is what motivates him to try everything in his power to dissuade Daenerys from a path of destruction. His temperance is also what guides him to reluctantly assassinate her. It's almost poetic that what leads to Joffrey's downfall is not a sword or spear, but wine, and this is really what makes him represent this sin better than anyone else. The same wine he overindulges in while making merry every day is what was used to end him easily.
It's nothing.
Not all sloths are plain lazy. Some are rather in a state of chronic lethargy. People like these often display a resistance to action, and in Robert Baratheon's case, it is a tragic curse masked as a crown.
Too fat for my armor.
Robert once fought with unmatched vigor to claim the throne of Westeros, but ever since that win, Sloth completely took over his soul. That is why instead of ruling, Robert was busy representing the deadly sin of sloth.
Been sitting here for days! Start the damn joust before I piss myself.
Contrary to Baratheon, Brienne of Tarth embodies the heavenly virtue of diligence, which is devotion and painstaking work to accomplish an undertaking. As a warrior of no mean repute, Brienne tirelessly pursues her goals, no matter how impossible or weighty they seem. Brienne lives and breathes diligence, from vowing to Lady Stark that she will protect her daughters to her loyalty to Renly Baratheon. She is a strong and skilled fighter, merciful and compassionate, unshakably loyal and determined.
Then I am yours, my lady.
And takes her duties as a warrior extremely seriously.
I will shield your back and give my life for yours if it comes to that.
Where Robert's days are filled with feasts and wine, Brienne's are filled with endless journeys and battles. Her diligence is unshakable as she fights through injury and stiff challenges. Some say, while Brienne trains to be a diligent knight, she just wants to be a pretty doting daughter but is stuck being neither, and no number of valiant deeds or pretty dresses will get her closer to either one because she is ugly, too big and mannish for a woman. But I say that. The lady is gold and her beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. No, it lies in her diligence, because despite all they say, Brienne is never swayed by hardship or the mockery she faces. So while Robert lets his laziness turn him into a farce, Brienne's diligence earns her respect and the title of Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Arise, Brienne of Tarth, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Pride is often seen as the root of all sins, a delusion that makes one elevate himself above others due to how it fuels arrogance and cruelty. And when it comes to pride, no character exemplifies it more destructively than Ramsay Bolton. Pride is the capital deadly sin, so it's only right to accord that sin to the most evil character in Game of Thrones.
Put him back where he belongs.
Ramsay derives a disgusting pleasure in the suffering of others. He flaunts his power to humiliate, control, and torment anyone he thinks is beneath him. From flaying his enemies alive to turning Theon Greyjoy into a broken shadow of himself, Ramsay's actions reveal a man who's consumed by his own inflated ego. And whilst Ramsay is doing all this, Davos Seaworth emerges on the other side as the spiffing role model for the heavenly virtue of humility. Rising from the rubbles in Flea Bottom to becoming Hand of the King, Davos never lets his newfound power erase his empathy or respect for others. He uses his position to serve, never looking for personal glory. Even as a trusted advisor to Stannis and later to Jon Snow, Davos always remembers his roots and treats others with respect. He is aware of his humble beginnings and grateful for the opportunity to help. Whereas, Ramsay's pride leads him to evil ways. No one who has seen this show could ever forget how he treated Theon in the most despicable and sadistic ways ever, which goes beyond just punishing an enemy to asserting dominance.
Your famous cock must be very precious to you. Would you say it's your most precious part?
Ramsay's pride is what fuels his delusion of being invincible. It leads him to his downfall when he underestimates Jon Snow. Ramsay's arrogance blinds him to the fact that his cruelty had united the North against him, while Davos Seaworth's humility becomes his strength and raises him as one of the most trusted men in the realm. Beware, pride goes before a fall, and a haughty spirit before destruction. Envy is the corrosive desire to possess what others have, usually at the cost of your own peace of mind. For Stannis Baratheon, envy is a defining characteristic that pushes him to extreme actions, isolating him from others around.
To the dungeon, lock him in a cell.
You've chosen the darkness, Sir Devils.
He resents his elder brother Robert's popularity and is jealous of his younger brother Renly's charm and easy influence on people. Stannis' jealousy also extends like a dark cloud to Ned Stark, whose affinity with Robert and appointment as Hand of the King leaves Stannis feeling slighted and ignored. Meanwhile, Samwell Tarly exemplifies the heavenly virtue of kindness in a way that is wicked. In a series where compassion is rare and often seen as weakness, Sam's empathy makes him stand out at the wall, where brutality and strength are the order of the day. Though he may look timid and bookish, Samwell's kindness transcends personal gain. His close bond with Jon Snow becomes a type of courage for him, and his selflessness shines most, especially in the episode where he risks his life to protect Gilly and her baby from White Walkers.
She's one of Craster's wives. I remember every word of the oath. I am the shield that guards the realms of men. That means her as well as us.
Unlike Sam, Stannis' envy manifests not just as resentment, but as a driving force that leads him to destructive decisions. When Robert appoints Ned as Hand, Stannis is so overcome with jealousy that he abandons his duty in King's Landing and retreats to Dragonstone. Even though he uncovered the conspiracy against Robert's rule, Stannis refuses to warn Ned. This action shows us how deeply the sin of envy compromised Stannis' sense of duty and justice. His envy pushes people away, but Sam's kindness draws others to him, making him a trusted and beloved member of the Night's Watch. Stannis' envy blinds him, making him feel entitled to the throne, not because he loves the realm, but because he sees it as his own. But in a surprising arc, just when we thought he couldn't hurt a fly with this sin, Stannis' unchecked envy makes him sacrifice his own daughter in a misguided attempt to lay hold on the crown.